So this is another camera in my collection. It's a No.1A Pocket Folding Kodak camera, Model D, made in around about 1912, so it's well over 100 years old. And in this video I'm going to get this camera taking pictures again, and I'm going to show you how to do that. But first of all, let's take a closer look at it. These were truly beautiful folding cameras of that era, possibly the golden era of photography. But this camera, I'm going to get the title right, I got it slightly wrong before. It's the No.1A Folding Pocket Kodak, and this is the Model D. And it was built around about 1912. But as I say, they are really beautiful cameras to look at, the way they fold, etc., and the materials that they used on these cameras is really top notch. If you look at this camera, the TEB number 5 that I did a video last year, again you can see the quality of it. Another beautiful camera. But because these cameras are very old, it doesn't mean to say that they're obsolete. What stops people using them is that they can't get the film sizes. This takes 1/16 roll film, the TEB took 1/18. Now you could shoot paper negatives, but I prefer to put film in them, and in this video I'm going to show how you convert this camera to shoot 120 roll film. Now it might look a little bit complicated in the video, but honestly, in reality it's dead easy to do, and you can do it within an hour and you're up and running, and you can go out and shoot with these lovely old cameras. Now I said this is a Model D, and that's because this one has a chrome metal plate that holds the lens. The earlier ones were wood, and it has the red bellows, so they are the rarer model. And I think this one's been really looked after, because the chrome work on it is absolutely perfect. There's no pitting whatsoever. The red bellows are really good. I've checked it, I can't see any holes in it, and I'm sure the leather. And the bodywork, it's got a lovely patina on it. The body on this camera, I think it's made of hardwood and aluminium. Now I paid, or my son paid, bought this for me last year in an antique shop, and it cost £35, which I think for a camera like this is not overpriced. This camera in 1912 was around about $10, so you know they're quite expensive then, so I think I've got quite a good buy. The camera worked fine. The shutter was sticking a little bit, but I'll show you when we get close up on this camera how easy it is to get to the shutter. So I just got that, cleaned it up, and it's working absolutely perfectly now. The red bellows, I checked though, there's no light going in. So it's a working camera, but I have to convert it to be able to shoot what you call modern day film, 120 roll film. So as I say, the fun is going out with these cameras, and they do take pictures with a timeless look to them. This camera I know will produce big negatives, and they will be blurrier at the edges, and they'll just have that look from that era, and you can't get that look from any other cameras other than these folding cameras. The TEB took really sharp pictures. I was really surprised with that, but it has a better lens than this. This is a single element meniscus lens, but it has its own character. So we'll move on now, and I'll show you how the camera works, etc., and have a much closer look at it. Right, let's take a closer look at the 1A Folding Pocket Kodak. This is the Model D. This is the rarer version, because it has a chrome front that holds the shutter and the iris assembly onto the camera, and it also has the red bellows. Now these cameras were produced from roughly 08 to 1915, and I think this camera was built around about 1912. Now to open the camera, there's a lever there. You press it down, that releases the front cover, and pull it up, and that reveals the front standard, and you can see the chrome standard front there that holds the shutter, etc., in place. To close the camera, it's held with these struts. You press it in like that, and it closes, and that makes this a compact camera, really, considering the negative size. A bit difficult to go in a trouser pocket, but it'll certainly go into a coat pocket. To remove the back, you can do it two ways. There's a slider switch there, there's a little lever at this side. I think this is the best one and easiest one to use. Is press that down, and the back should just pull off. and that reveals the back of the camera and the film gate. Now you can see I've done some modifications already, and later on in the video I'll show you how I've done that, so it will take 120 roll film. Look how that's built there, it's absolutely beautiful, this chrome part. That must be for the spring for the door assembly. Now to put the back on, you just simply put it over the top and slide it into place, and then press it tightly until it clicks. So let's look at the lens now, and the shutter. Open the front again, and I'll just zoom in a little bit for this. Right, this is what they call a pocket automatic shutter on the camera, and it has 3 settings: time, set it to time, press the lever, the actual shutter stays open, and press it when you're ready to, when you've exposed, as long as you want to do. It has B, that opens the shutter, but you have to keep hold of the lever and then let go to close it. And then there's instantaneous, and that just fires the shutter, it opens and closes. And I think this runs round about 1/25th of a second, so it's fairly slow for a camera of this size. Now as you can see here, we've got some numbers. These represent the apertures. I don't think aperture sizes were standardised when this camera was made. So it goes from 1, 2, 3, 4, and from what I can find out, these represent, and I'll open the shutter so you can see it moving. These represent number 1, I think it's F11, number 2 is F16, number 3 is F22, and number 4 is F32. And you can see the shutter, the iris as it's closed there. If I push it further, I'm sure it'll go down to F45 or something like that, and it'll actually open a little bit wider. But I'll work with those numbers and hopefully they'll be correct. If they're slightly out, I'm hoping the film's latitude, black and white film, will cope with that. So, close the shutter. Now this is unusual. I've not seen this on any Kodak cameras before. You can actually remove the shutter and the iris assembly by just pressing the lever at this side, and then lifting the whole shutter off. And that now reveals the meniscus lens. And that's great because you can get to that to clean it. This was dirty. I can get to that to clean that easily at the front and at the back. Open the bellows and you can close the camera, and you can get to the rear of the element to clean that. So that's great. Because the shutter comes off, it's easy to work on. You just undo those 2 screws, lift the plate off, and you can get in to clean it. Don't be frightened, nothing will fall out. It's dead easy to maintain these shutters. And then to put the lens back on, it's a bit fiddly, you have to bear with me. You have to locate those little lugs into those holes there, and it's in place now. It's locked in place, but it does move slightly. It's unusual is this setup, because normally the shutter selector is at the top, but on this camera it's at the side. To use the camera, you can stand it up with these legs. I'll just zoom out a little bit more now. With these legs, they are very, very flimsy though, but you can use it, and then you can also then stand it on something, solid surface, and look through that viewfinder to compose. You can't focus on this camera, it all works with the depth of field, so you've got to get used to it. That's looking in portrait mode. To do it in landscape, you just simply turn the camera that way. Now I've done a modification for this, and I'll show you that later on in the video to make it easier to use. But as I say, the legs on it are quite flimsy. And the other thing with this camera, if I can show you closer in, if I press that shutter, I don't know if you can tell, but it moves this section. It's quite flimsy, so that's going to be quite challenging. I'm going to have to hold it somehow at this side when I press the shutter. The other thing with this camera, which is quite unusual for its size, there's no tripod sockets anywhere on it. So I'm going to have to devise a way, if I want to use it on a tripod, to hold it. I did try this way. It's not solid, but it does hold it. But I'm just going to have to be very careful and very gentle when I take pictures, because at 1/25th of a second you're quite likely to get camera shake. As I say, to close the camera up, just press it down like that and it closes up. There's only that lever to open the front standard there, and this is your wind lever there. And this holds you pull these out to fit in the spool in the camera. There's one there, and there'll be one on the other side when you open the back, when you take the back off. So that's basically it. It's a really beautifully made camera, and as I say, the only areas that I am going to struggle with this camera is the fact that the front standard does move when you press the shutter lever, so I'm going to have to be very careful there. And I'm going to have to hold the camera very steady because it has no tripod sockets, and the shutter speed is only 1/25th of a second. So that's the camera close up. Let's move on now, and I will show you how you convert this camera from 1/16 to 1/20 roll film. Right, this is the camera with the back off, revealing the film gate. Now if I had have been using 1/16 film, the negative would have covered this area from there to there, which is 4¼ inches, to there, which is 2½. The actual image area would have been a little bit less. But because I can't get the 1/16 film, I'm converting the camera to use 1/20 roll film. Now it's important at this stage to decide what size of negative you want to create, because you have to put a mask inside to fill this area, and then you do the cutout to the size of the negative that you want to create. Now if it was a 6x7 one, you'd have to have the mask so it filled in all this side there with it opening at 6x7. But I want to use the whole of the negative area, so I'll get a negative size of 4¼ inches by 2¼ inches, or just a little bit less. But because I'm using the film gate on its width, all I need to do is fill in the top and the bottom. And I'll show you now how much filling in I have to do for the 1/20. I've got the test negative on the camera now. Just push it through if I can. A little bit of tape on it. Tighten it up with the tape, and then we can see now, you can see that it's nearly there. I have a little bit of a gap at the bottom and a little gap at the top, so I need to put some black thick card into that area there and into the bottom area, and that will stop the film hopefully from curling as much as you can see it's doing now. And that way I can use 1/20 roll film and get this nice big negative size. I like this size because I'm going to get a lot in the picture obviously, but if I want to do a panoramic shot I can do it with this camera, because I have to when I'm taking the picture just keep in mind you know, composing for a panoramic, and then just crop the image to get this long negative. So that's the first thing I've got to do, is fill in these this bit at the top and the bottom, and I'll show you when I've done that. Right, I've got the card fixed at the bottom and the top, so it's just narrowed that gap. Stuck it with super glue and it's quite solid as that now. Painted it matte black, it looks really neat. Put a little bit of film in, get that through, and then just hold it tight, and you can see that there's no gap now at the top or the bottom, and the film when it's properly loaded into camera won't be curling at the bottom and top edges. Now I've got the 1/20 film to fit in the back of the camera. The next problem is to make the 1/20 roll film fit into a 1/16 camera. The joys of getting these old cameras working. This is the side of the camera that you load the film in, and this is a roll of 120 roll film, and as you can see it just doesn't fit, it's not long enough. This is the original spool, the 116 spool, and this is a 120 spool. So we have to extend this to the same size as that spool, and I do that by using these little adapters made by a company called Camera Arc. That's where I get them from. They do different sizes of adapters to suit all film sizes, and they simply slot in the ends of the 120 roll film like that, and now it's the same height as the 116 spool, and it will fit into the camera, and we can use it as a normal camera now. So we've got 120 roll film into a 116 camera. As you can see at the take up side, I've already got the extenders on the spool, and it works absolutely perfectly. Right, get that done and then measure the film. Right, this is the way I set the camera up to know when I'm wound onto the first and subsequent frames. We don't have any red window. We have a red window on this camera, but we can't use it because we can't see any numbers on the backing paper, because this is 120 film and the 116 was quite wider. Now, before we actually pull the film over onto the take-up spool, it's important to put this mark above the film gate. Now, you can put that mark at this side, it can be in the middle. I prefer it nearer the roll of film. It's just less chance of fogging it. I would always advise loading these cameras in subdued lighting. They're not the easiest cameras to load because of this wooden strip that goes across. But that mark is very important, because when we pull the leader across onto a take-up spool and wind the film on, we wind it until the start mark on the backing paper aligns up with that. Once it's aligned, we can then count the number of turns with the wind on lever it takes to get to the first frame, and then we can work it from there. So that mark is very important, don't forget to do that. So the next part is to wind the film on by attaching the leader onto the take-up spool. Now, I do find this quite awkward sometimes with these cameras, as I say, because of this wooden strut that goes across. And then locate it into that slot, which I've done. Make sure it's nice and tight in, and then keep hold of it, keep it tight onto that slot, and then turn the film. Keep turning it. And we can see now this side we've got the start mark appearing, and we're going to line that up with that white mark. So keep turning the film until we get to that start mark there. Now this is where we have to count the number of turns it takes to get to the first frame. So I'm going to go, that's 1, that's 2, that's 3, that's 4, that's 5, that's 6, and this is the 7th. So that's 7 times. The film starts round about that mark, so I'm safely within the film gate. So I'll just put a little mark there. We'll call this frame number 1. Now, we need a gap between the film, and I like to be generous with that, because sometimes it varies with the roll of film you put into these cameras, how wide the gap is. I prefer a wider gap and lose a frame than having to double expose on the last exposure. You're then wasting 2 frames. So this is the film gate there. I'll put a mark there. That's the gap between the negatives, and then count the number of turns it takes for that mark to get to the film gate. So it's 1, 2, 3. So it's 3 turns, and it makes that gap, that's the film gate, it makes the gap wider. But as I say, I don't mind that. I'd rather know that I'm going to get 5 frames without any double exposing. So that's frame number 2. Put a mark there on the film gate and then a mark there and carry on. So that's 1, 2, 3. Again, we got that gap, so this is number 3, and then mark there, say that's the gap, or it's going to be wider. Wind on again, 1, 2, 3. So that's the third exposure. The gap's getting a little bit wider. So we're number 4 now. Put a mark there and a mark there. Wind it on. That's 1. That's 2. And that's 3. And that's the 5th exposure. Now, how far can I go? Let's have a little look underneath. I've still got some film to play with. We'll try it. I'll put a mark there, and then wind it on. 1, 2, let's have a look. No, I'm not going to get one, so I'm only going to get 5 exposures. If I was very careful, I might get 6 exposures, but I'm risking this this double exposure. So I'll just continue to wind the film off now, and we know where we're going. So it's 7 full turns of the wind on lever to get to the first frame, and then to get to each frame it's 3 turns, and that's how we know how we work without using the red wind at the back of the camera. Now I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with the viewfinder on this camera, because it's pretty difficult to see in bright light. Right, the final thing that I would suggest to do to make these cameras easier to use is get a little bit of card and make a box. This was a piece of black card. I've made the black on the inside and I've covered it in black tape, and that will fit over the brilliant viewfinder on these cameras like that, and this will make the camera so much easier to use. Let me show you the difference with this example. So this is looking through the brilliant finder with no hood on, and you can see we've got all sorts of reflections from the sky going on, and it makes it very difficult to get composition. Now when I fit the homemade hood, you can see the big difference it makes. So that's without it and that's with. And you know, on some days when it's quite bright, it's even worse than looking through it like that. You can't see anything. So it's worth the effort to make one of these, and it'll just make using these old cameras a lot easier. So that's the final modification of the bright viewfinder, and I'm ready now to load some 120 roll film in the camera. I'm not going to raise my expectations too high with these types of cameras. If you do that, you will end up being disappointed, but I'll be happy if I get some sort of pictures, half decent pictures. The main thing, I'm hoping I'm not going to get any light leaks. I've got 5 exposures, and let's see what this No.1A Folding Pocket Kodak camera can come up with. Right, I'm ready to go out and test the camera. I've loaded it with Ilford FP4, and I've also made a couple of minor adjustments to the camera, and I'll show you. Now I've stuck onto the camera a cold shoe and fitted the Viewfinder VC2 meter. I'll set that to 30th of a second and leave that because this camera on it has 1 shutter speed, and then adjust the aperture until the green LED comes on. So that's telling me I'll be shooting at 30th of a second at f11. So that's that. And the other thing is, when you're looking in this viewfinder, it's cut out for portrait and for landscape, but when you're looking through it, it's difficult to sort of keep that if you're doing landscape, it's keeping this small area, ignoring that, and it can confuse you a little bit. So what I've done, I've put some strips of card inside the hood, and now you can see, if you can see that the now I'm seeing the landscape format without the cutouts showing. And then if we put it that way, turn the camera over and then turn this round, and then again it's just hiding the cutouts, so it really does help me with the composition and I won't get confused with it. So move on now, 5 pictures to take, and hopefully the one thing that I'm worrying about is if I get any light leaks, but I won't know until I've taken the pictures. So onward and get these exposures taken. Right, I think I've found my first shot. I like these lamps, and this wall leads you to those angular shapes of buildings and the chimney at the top. So that's going to be my first shot. Oh, come on, Mark, take the picture. Hey, listen, lad, they can't rush these old folding cameras. You've got to take your time and press that shutter slowly. Dearie me, at last. So that's the first exposure, which was, I set it at 1/30th of a second at I think f16. The actual shutter speed on this is 125, but the difference between 30th and 125 won't make a lot of difference. So the next thing I've got to do is wind the camera on, and from the test we did before, it's 3 full turns to the next frame, so it's 1, 2, 3. So I'm on the second shot and we'll move on. Right, this is the actual image from that first shot. Now this is why I love getting these old folding vintage cameras going again. Considering that this camera's around about 112 years old, it has a top shutter speed of 1/25th of a second. Its widest aperture is f11, and it has a single uncoated meniscus lens. Taking that all into consideration, these cameras, once you get them working again, can produce some really nice pictures. And this is why I love film photography. These are things that you can do that obviously you can't do with digital cameras. Now this image is one that I've added just a touch of contrast, because you might think, well, you've enhanced it, but this is the image I've added a touch of contrast, and this is the original film scan from the Epson V800, and as you can see, I've converted it to black and white from that raw scan and done no editing whatsoever. So you can see I haven't done a lot with the picture, but it's produced a nice image. I've added just a little bit more contrast and tone for effect. The sharpness isn't amazing, but you can't expect that from a camera and a lens of this age, but from a correct viewing distance it's perfectly fine. I'm sure the sharpness would improve if the lens was stopped down more. If you look at a lot of pictures taken with these old cameras, a lot of time they're out of focus or they're blurry. You just have to take care when you're pressing that shutter at that slow speed with such a big negative. And the focal length on this camera, I think it's somewhere around about 110, 115 millimeter. So you have to really hold the camera really steady, but the shutter's really smooth and there's no vibration from that leaf shutter. So I'm really pleased, and as I say, this is why I love film photography. So this is my next shot, this old wharf bank mill. It's now all offices etc, but I think it'll make an interesting picture. The only trouble, I've got a car that's going to be in the photograph, but I can't do anything about that. This viewfinder that I've created is, I don't know if you can see that, it's really helping me. When I say viewfinder, I mean the hood. It really is helping me with the composition. So I'll take a light reading now and take this picture of this old mill. Same exposure as before, but this time it's going to be in landscape format. So make sure I hold this camera very, very steady. Right, that's got that shot. Winder on. 1, 2, 3. Third exposure coming up. Now, after seeing the first picture and this one, keep in mind I have done no cropping to these, it's just as they've come out of the camera. I'm getting to love the look of this long negative. It almost has a panoramic look to it without cropping. If I'd used a 6x7, a 6x9 or even a 35mm camera, I would have had to have cropped to get this look. This looks more natural to me and I really like the look of it. Now if we zoom in, again we can see that the lens, the single element meniscus lens, uncoated, how much detail that it can resolve from a distance. And the centre is quite sharp, it softens as it goes to the edges, but I think that adds to the character of the picture. There's no real distortion at the edges, which I'm very pleased. I thought I would have got that, so I'm very pleased. Now this is the raw scan converted to black and white. I've done nothing else to this picture. This is how it's come out of the camera, other than I've darkened down the sky just a little bit. Now I do see a slight problem just above the windows where the roof line is. You can see that there's a bright area there, and I think that might be just a little light leak, but keep us fingers crossed it doesn't happen in the next picture. But overall I'm really pleased to the look of the images this camera's producing so far. Right, I've just taken a shot across the river wharf. I'm hoping to try and get a more of a panoramic shot. I'm not sure, difficult through this viewfinder. I managed to get a boat in the foreground, so we'll see how we go on. I've got 2 images left now. The light's not brilliant, but it might be brightening up a little bit, so see what I can do with the next 2 shots. As you can see in this picture, I've cut off the bottom of the boat. The problem is I couldn't get any further back because of the safety railings that go on the edge of the river wharf. So I went up to the railings, and looking through the bright viewfinder, I'm 100% sure I had the whole of that boat in the picture. But it just goes to show that these bright viewfinders that you look through are just a guide, they're not accurate. And if you want to make sure that you get something important within the picture, always pull back and leave a little bit more room than you think you need. Also on this picture there's a dark edge on the right hand side of the picture. I think that's where I had the camera up against the railings, and one of the railing uprights has got into the picture, and it's caused the lens to vignette. Otherwise a very nice picture, and I'm really enjoying using this camera. Right, light's getting a bit low, but I've tried this shot of this dummy on a straw bale and the rest in the background, so see what it looks like. It's brilliant, this. They do it each year. It's unreal. I wouldn't like to come in on a dark night. Right, I've got 1 shot left now. That looks a bit like me. 1 shot left, and that's it. Go and develop it and see what's happened. more that I use this vintage Kodak camera and see the pictures that it can produce, I really am amazed. But I think it's down to the meniscus single element lens, and it's uncoated, and I think the fact that it's uncoated gives this lovely soft vintage look. The tones in it, transition of tones, is not harsh or garish, it's just a nice soft transition, and it just looks natural to me. So these old cameras have a lot going for them, and if you want to get that vintage look, you need to be shooting with these uncoated lenses really. Right, move on to the next picture, last picture actually. The last shot was this this sign, the one that's just gone. I think it'll contrast nice with these dark cottages on the road. So as I say, that's the last shot, and we'll see how they turn out. Right, I had to escape pretty quick from that position I was on the road. I was getting absolutely wet through, it was absolutely throwing it down. So, but as I say, that was the last shot. The exposure was 1/25th of a second, we think, at f11. So we'll see how it turns out. Now I've managed to get myself on the what's called railway path at Otley, and it's quite covered with trees. And it should keep me reasonably dry before I get home. I'm not far to go. Now I'm going to develop these negatives in 510 Pyro, and when I go home I'm not going to open the back of the camera and set the roll out. Well, I am going to do, but I'm going to do it in a changing bag. And the reason I would always advise trying that first with these old cameras is that if you open the back up, it's quite likely that the roll of film that's wound will unravel, or is partially unravelled and not tight, and it'll let light in at the edges and it can ruin your shots. So I'm going to do it in the changing bag. If it feels tight, then no problem, I can take it out and then load it into my tank. But if it feels, you know, like it's not tightly wound, I'll put it into the developing tank in the bag. So we'll just have to see. Once I've done it, I know then. So next time I'll have to remember to fetch my raincoat. I had it already because it did forecast showers, but like a dipstick, I left it at home. Right, move on, and you can see from this I am quite sheltered, and I've not far to go now. Right, I got the 120 roll film developed, all went well, but you do know that because you've already seen the pictures. I was pleased there was no light leaks, other than that second picture which I showed you, but that didn't happen on the other 4 negatives, so I'm assuming that the camera is light tight. And that really is a testament to the build quality and design on this camera, because there's no light seals, it's just the way it pushes together. So I can confidently go out with this and know that I'm not going to get a light leak. One of the things that I did do, I didn't show you, I taped up the red window where you'd read the frame numbers on the 116 film. That is an area, excuse me, that could fog the film, so always tape that up. The other thing was the frame spacing. It got really wide as I got to the end of the roll. They got wider and wider. So what I'm going to do when I use it again is obviously I'm going to wind 7 times from the start mark to get to the first frame, and then for the first 2 frames I'm going to wind on 3 full turns, and thereafter do 2.5 turns, and I know that I will definitely get 6 exposures out of 1 roll of 120 roll film. The shutter speeds and the apertures, there's no real data on the internet about this. Kodak used these numbers 1, 2, 3 and 4. Now from what I did find out, first of all, the shutter speed was 1/25th of a second, and that the apertures would be, number 1 would be f11, then f16, f22 and f32. So I didn't know until I tried that, and I used this meter, the Voigtlander VC2, which I know is accurate, I got some really well exposed negatives, so I'm assuming that the apertures, what I've just said, are correct. Now, when I was metering, I was metering at 30th of a second. The shutter speed is 1/25th, but I don't think that made any difference to it. It might have helped with a little more exposure. So if you go out with these cameras, you as a starting point, try those apertures. The shutter speed is what it is, and you know, really, when you think about it, the camera is, you know, over 112 years old, and the shutter's still working, I would think, accurately. So again, another testament to the build quality of these simply made Kodak cameras. Now, previously in the video, I said this. I'm not going to raise my expectations too high with these types of cameras. If you do that, you will end up being disappointed. Really, I shouldn't have said anything really. I think I did that just to cover myself. But most folding cameras that I've used do produce really nice pictures. But this camera in particular blew me away. The quality and the look of the images from it are absolutely wonderful. I really like that look it gives. And if you look at this, this is one of the negatives scanned on the computer, and then I zoom in 100%, and you can see the amount of detail that the simple meniscus lens that's uncoated can capture in a brightly lit area. Now, when I was photographing that particular day, the light wasn't brilliant, so I think in brighter light you're going to get even sharper pictures. So I was well pleased with it. Using these cameras, you have to be treat them gently. Don't rush when you're taking pictures. The shutter speed is very slow for a camera that produces negatives that size, and I was shocked really to see how good the negatives were hand holding at that speed. And you're going to have to hand hold with this because there's no tripod mounts on it anywhere to fit it onto a tripod. So all in all, a really great experience, and I would say that this is one of the best folding cameras I own. The Teb 5 that I did the video last year, that also produced really beautiful negatives, but I don't think they were as good as this. They were sharper somehow. They had more contrast, but these have that vintage look to them to me, and it's something that only these, as I say, folders can give you. The other thing was the hood that I made for the viewfinder. That helped me tremendously, and I don't know why I haven't thought of it before actually, and I'm going to do it for any other folders that I get in the future, or the ones I own now. Looking through them sometimes can be a nightmare, but when you put the hood on, it makes the whole user experience much better. So definitely do that. It's an easy thing to do, and it will really help you when you're looking through these bright finders. So all in all, a great experience. I love the camera, and I'll definitely go out and take more pictures with it. Not only do I like, as I say, the quality that you get from it, the look from it, I also love this long format. I mentioned previously in the video about cropping it to do panoramics. I don't think there's any need. It has a panoramic look as it is, so I'm just going to leave it well alone. Right, it's been a long video, but I like to put as much information in the videos to help you guys get these cameras going and hopefully inspire you to go out and use them. Just because the film size is odd or obsolete, it doesn't mean to say that you can't get them working again. The main thing with these cameras when you buy them is to make sure that the bellows are usable or repairable. Don't get one like this which is totally gone. This cannot be repaired, but the shutter's fine, the rest of the camera's great. But to get bellows made for these cameras, which you can do, will cost you 10 times as much as what you paid for the camera. That's of course unless you can make your own. So make sure that the bellows are okay. The shutters usually are fine, they're easy to get going again, there's nothing complicated about them, so I won't worry about that. So you know, I paid £35, or my son did, for this camera, and it's not just a lovely thing to look at, it is a photographic tool, and they were meant to be used. So get these old folders going, keep their history going, and help keep filter live. So if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up, a like, hit that notification bell. If you have any questions, leave them below and I'll get back to you. And I'd like to say a big thank you to everybody who's subscribed to my channel over the years. I'm just over 10,000 subscribers now, so thank you very much. And as I always say, stay safe, and I'll see you all in the next video. The Kodak No.1A Folding Pocket Kodak.